Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in, you missed a great show. We started off our first two segments talking about the NCAA, the road that it's going down, what that might mean for the future of not just college basketball, college football, but for all of NCAA sports and for the organization itself. We just finished talking about some major baseball moves, including Dylan Cease getting traded to the Padres from the White Sox and Devin Williams, who is probably the best closer in baseball, going down for 3 months. In this final segment, we are going to transition into some football. We're going to talk a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys, about how awful their offseason has been so far. There's plenty of room for them to turn it around. Obviously, it's just beginning, but they've made one minor move. As far as free agency goes, they were the last team to make a move, and this is after Jerry Jones claims that they were all in this season. As well as some other major trade news, Sam Howell was traded from the Commanders to the Seahawks. The Commanders are really building something good, I think. They brought a new GM in, a new coach. I'm not a big fan of Dan Quinn, but what their GM is doing, setting them up for success, I really like the way it's looking right now. As well as Debo, supposedly the Ravens are looking at trading for him. That would be fun, having Debo Samuel on that Ravens team with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and everyone else there. But before we get too far into it, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. If you leave a note with it, it'll pop up on the bottom of the screen there. We'll have a little discussion about what you had to say. It'll pop up for me, you, for everybody watching all around the internet, as well as out there in the future. We appreciate anything that you guys do give. Again, that link to leave a tip or donation is gsmcpodcast.net. But like I was saying, let's get right into some football. Cowboys free agency woes. We're going to start off with the Cowboys because they're America's team. Why not start off right with them? They have done nothing. They finally got themselves on the board in free agency, signing a linebacker late last night. Not something that really moves the needle. He's probably not going to start. He might come in backing up Leighton Vander Esch there, but the Cowboys have done next to nothing, and they've lost a lot of key pieces. Offensively, they've lost Tony Pollard, leaving their number one running back in that stable to be Deuce Vaughn. Not a spot you really want to be in, expecting a Super Bowl. They are letting all-pro left tackle Tyron Smith walk, who, by all accounts, is the number one free agent still available. Reports are they're letting Michael Gallup seek a trade. They have lost a lot of major pieces, and they haven't really done a lot to get it back. Now, like I was saying, the league year officially opened up yesterday. Now, really, it opened up 3 days ago on the 11th when the legal tampering period started. But the Cowboys haven't done anything to address it, and they can address it through the draft. But where they're picking, they're not going to be able to get those super elite guys. And I don't mind it. Sometimes going in and overreacting, getting these big name guys, doesn't always work. But for the way that the Cowboys are and the amount of criticism they got for not firing Mike McCarthy this offseason, they needed to do something to appease the fans. They needed to make one big splash. And I know they don't have that much cap space, but they needed to do something to show that, oh, we're not just sitting here twiddling our thumbs. We're not just sitting here with nothing on our mind, not to just not do anything. We're going to compete. We're going to finally get past that second round. We are the Cowboys. We can compete. They haven't done anything to inspire any confidence like that. In fact, it's only made it worse. They've done nothing. Not a good look for a team like the Cowboys that's supposed to be perennial contenders, supposedly. Now, they're still going to be a very good team, don't get me wrong. You still have a top 10 quarterback in Dak Prescott. That defense is still really good. You're only going to get healthier. You have Deron Bland, who set a record for most pick sixes in a season. You're getting Trayvon Diggs back. Excuse me, I fumbled his first name for a second. You're getting Trayvon Diggs back. That's going to be a huge get for them. That defense is going to be fine. The offense is going to be good. It definitely is going to take a step back. And I'm curious to see how much of a step back it's going to take. Now, we still have the draft. An interesting guy that I think they should probably target, especially if they're getting rid of Michael Gallup, is Mike Williams, who was just cut by the Chargers. That's a guy that I think the Cowboys would love to have in. He would fit really well. He's kind of an upgraded version of Michael Gallup, a big, tall, jump ball receiver. Win those 50-50 balls, make them 70-30 balls, you know? He's very good. That's a guy that I think they should be targeting. And a name that I've heard recently, and I'm not sure, I'm not a Cowboys fan, so I'm not sure how Cowboys fans would feel about it, but I wouldn't mind it if it's for a small contract. Bring Zeke back. Zeke had a quietly solid year in New England with a really bad team, a really bad offensive line, splitting carries with Ramondre Stevenson. He had a sneaky solid year. Now, it wasn't elite by any stretch of the imaginations, but you bring him back on a small veteran minimum type deal, I think that'd be really good. He's still got a little bit of juice left. He's not the 1,400, 1,500 yard rusher that he was when he was winning the rushing titles. But he's still a really good running back. Or he's still a good running back, I should say. So he's still got some juice left. Those are a couple moves that if I'm the Cowboys, I'm probably making. These guys aren't going to be super expensive to get. They're going to be relatively cheap. You can restructure a couple contracts if you need. They've got plenty of time to do that. But the draft is also around the corner. So I don't want to overreact too much to their lack of moves. The bigger story of the day, though, Sam Howell traded to the Seahawks. Sam Howell, who I don't want to say had a bad season. It wasn't a good season by any stretch of the imagination. I think it was slightly better than bad. He was traded to the Seahawks for 2 pick swaps. He's going to now compete with Geno Smith, which is really interesting to me. I know Geno Smith took a step back last season, but the fact that he's having to compete for his starting job with Sam Howell, who did not look particularly convincing in Washington last season, is a little surprising to me. It takes the Seahawks off the board for a potential Justin Fields landing spot, which is looking more and more sparse. The landscape is continuing to dry up for the Bears. They need to make this trade, and they need to make it soon. There's only one team that I think, in my brain, would even make any sense to trade him to for him to compete for a starting job. And that would be the Raiders. You can throw the Broncos in there, but the Broncos are going to draft J.J. McCarthy. And they're ahead of the Raiders, so whoever doesn't draft him, I think one of those two teams are going to draft J.J. McCarthy, and whichever one of those two does not, that's who I expect Justin Fields to go to. It's not going to be a lot of compensation. They were asking for a first. They're not getting a first. We're looking more at like a third, fourth, maybe a fifth. It reminds me of the Baker Mayfield situation, that ugly divorce that they had when he was leaving Cleveland. You know, he'd just taken him to the playoffs a couple years ago, and now he's out here looking at getting traded to the Panthers for a sixth? They held on to him too long. They lost all their leverage, and they didn't have any bargaining power. It was a very interesting situation, and it has shades of this here. But the other big story is Deebo Samuel possibly on the move. And this one is very interesting because there was a report that came out earlier today that was immediately shut down by the GM. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the reporter came out and he said he's a lying GM. I have texts, basically. He didn't show the receipts. He didn't show the texts. But he came out and he said, I've got receipts. Adding Deebo to that offense is really fun to think about. Now, do I think the 49ers are going to trade Deebo Samuel? Absolutely not. Unless they get some kind of crazy trade compensation, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for them to move off a weapon like Deebo Samuel. And I'm not committing to calling him a wide receiver or a running back. He's a weapon. What he can do with the ball in his hands is special. There's not many people in the history of the league that can do what he can do. But adding him to that Ravens offense, imagine this. Imagine pistol formation. Ravens backfield. Lamar Jackson at quarterback. Deebo Samuel in the backfield. Derrick Henry there with him. Who's going to take the ball? What are you going to do? What are you going to do there? How do you stop that? Run a little triple option with those guys. Oof, that's nasty. I've been picturing that all day in my brain, and what it's going to take to get Debo is probably not a price the Ravens are willing to pay. You know, GM call about players all the time. You know, always good to check in, say, hey, I'm interested in getting this guy. You interested in selling him at all? And most of the time that answer is no. Never hurts to check, and I assume that's what this was. But the way the 49ers are running up against the cap, Debo signed that massive contract. They've been talking about trading away Ayuk, and I think it comes to their personal preference. Do they want the younger, more wide receiver archetype that is Ayuk to sign and stay with the Niners, or do they want to keep Debo? And that's a discussion that I'm sure John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are having right now, which is why this report is coming out that they're looking at getting him. There's been reports all offseason that Brandon Ayuk has been on the trade block because they don't have the money to pay him. There's a lot of things that can happen, a lot of things that might happen. It's a very interesting situation developing there in San Francisco, a team that's very good, will be very good without either of those guys, but one of them is most likely going to get traded. And imagining Debo on the Ravens is, whew, that would be fun to watch. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, though. Anything else that you wanted to talk about, leave it in the comments. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Real quick before we go off, there's breaking news. Joe Mixon has just signed a 3-year, $27 million contract extension with the Texans. He was traded to the Texans after the Bengals went out and got another running back. They traded him instead of cutting him. Joe Mixon is a little older. He had a down season last year. But bringing him on to the Texans who lost Devin Singletary to free agency, I think that's a good deal. He's a little bit older. You still have Dameon Pierce there to split the carries with him. Joe Mixon can do a lot more out of the backfield than Dameon Pierce can do. I like that move for the Texans. Again, running back age is the big question. It's always in recent years it's been the big question, and I expect it to continue to be the big question until we get a couple more years of evidence of running back fall-offs. But yeah, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Back here, same place, same time, tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern. Anything you guys want to talk about, go ahead and leave a comment. I'll go check that out. You guys have a great rest of your day. Be back tomorrow. Bye-bye. Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.